I am required by preacher law to make this joke at the beginning of every year. So far, your attendance at church has been perfect this year. Congratulations on winning the gold star. Let's not mess it up now, all right? Come back next week. We're going to be in, I'll talk about this in a little bit, we are starting a series on Acts. We asked Eva what her favorite book was, and we said we're going to do that. No, we actually have been planning this for a long time. It's kind of in conjunction with some of what's going on at church life, church-wide, where we think we're going as a church, so that's going to be part of it. We actually publish ourselves this little booklet. It's a little guide to Acts, and it just gives you a little breakdown, some thoughts, some ideas about what Acts is saying and doing, where it's going, and it gives you a little daily assignment. So if you like that sort of thing, you want to grab one of these. These are going fast. They're a hot item. There's only 250 in print, but that's enough for everybody to be able to have one. So we want to make sure that you get a chance. Grab one on your way out. Like Eva said, if you haven't been here very much, that's okay. That's no problem at all. In fact, if you haven't been reading the book of Acts and you're like, I'm going to be out of it, I don't know what's going on, there's only been 2 daily assignments because we take Saturdays and Sundays off. So you've only missed 2. You can catch back up. Super easy. It's going to be great. Don't worry about it at all. Our mission statement that we try to remind ourselves of, including staff, we try to remind ourselves of, is that we want to help everyone take their next step closer to Jesus. That's the whole thing. And there really is no book better designed to exemplify that than the book of Acts. Acts chapter 1, verse 1. Acts chapter 1, verse 1. He writes, in my former book, Theophilus, I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and teach until the day he was taken up to heaven. And right at the beginning of that verse, you see there's a lot of stuff going on. First of all, you realize that the book of Acts, the book that you're reading, is a sequel. There was another book that this guy wrote before that. It's a sequel. Now, the reason there's a sequel is because they actually wrote on scrolls. They didn't have like Word documents to type things out. And so you get to a certain length and the scroll is unwieldy. It's too long. And so you have to start another scroll. A scroll would be about 35 feet long, which I think is kind of interesting. Right? 35 feet, and you have to unroll it as you read. And I don't know, if you got a big, hefty book, you got to carry a 35-foot scroll around. And then Luke, the author of this, was like, we need to write a sequel, or I need to write part 2. And so he wrote Acts. So really, it would be one book. It's just divided into 2 separate parts. So if you're reading Luke and you just keep going, you end up reading Acts. And then there's somebody named Theophilus in there. If you've been doing the reading, you actually know, but does anybody know what Theophilus, the name Theophilus, means? Yeah, friend of God, lover of God. Yeah, and it's in the reading there. So there's a little there's some hidden clues that maybe will give you a little bonus every Sunday, a little trivia every Sunday. But that's one of them. That this is a friend of God, and it might have been a real person, could have been a real person, could just mean any of us who want to explore more about what God is and who He is, what He's doing in the world, could be written to us as well. And then he says, that's Luke, I wrote this. And then I think this is so fascinating, right? He says that Jesus began, and the grammar's a little odd there. I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and to teach until the day he was taken up into heaven. And the emphasis is on this idea that there's this ongoing doing and teaching. Even though Jesus is no longer here, that the story continues, and that it even continues to this point that we are part of it. He goes on to write, after giving instructions through the Holy Spirit to the apostles he had chosen, after his sufferings, he presented himself to them and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. Acts operates a little bit like a documentary. It's history. It's a lot of history. And he knows the person to whom he's writing, you and I, but also this Theophilus, is not an eyewitness. And he wants to just capture everything he can to help people come along the journey that is this story of the book of Acts. He appeared to them over a period of 40 days and spoke about the kingdom of God. Now, some of you may be thinking, okay, we've jumped right in, but why Acts? There's 66 books in the Bible. Why did you pick Acts? Why Acts of all the books of the Bible? Well, the secret plan that we haven't told everybody yet, the secret plan is to get you to read the whole Bible. That's the plan. And so we're just doing it little by little. So last year we read all through all 4 Gospels. A couple years ago we read through like Genesis through, where did we end up? Leviticus. Deuteronomy, and it was like kind of intense. These are sections of the Bible that you probably wouldn't read if you're on your own, or you would kind of skim through. And so we dug in, and Acts is part of that. I'm not saying you wouldn't read it necessarily on your own, but we want to just present to you the whole Bible. And so over the course of 4 or 5 years, if you stick with the plan that we have, you're going to end up reading all of the scriptures. But there's really 3 specific reasons I want to get into as we dig into the sermon here today. 3 reasons why we're going to read Acts. Number one, Acts answers our questions. Acts answers our questions. You're like, I don't have any questions. Well, give me a second. I'll give you some. Acts chapter 1, verse 15. In those days, this is in the same chapter. In those days, Jesus is gone, and they're just praying and waiting for something to happen. It says, in those days, Peter stood up among the believers. And he writes, it's a group of about 120. I think this is interesting because you're going to note this as you read through Acts. Luke loves numbers. He loves telling you how many people are in a crowd. I actually like that too. I like knowing how many people are here on a Sunday. I think it's kind of cool to know, oh, this particular Sunday, we had this many people or this few people, or it was snowing, and this is why. We actually, as far as I know in the time that I've been here, in 2025, we had our highest attendance that we've ever had in the history of Woodbury Church. Again, as far as I know, for a church service, and that was Easter Sunday last year. I think that stuff's interesting. I like knowing that stuff. It matters, and it seems to matter to Luke. He's interested in that. But he also seems fascinated by exploring a question. And the question is, how did this small group of people that were holed up in an upper room just praying because they didn't know what was going on, how did that group of people turn into what we see today as the church? How did that happen? And Luke is exploring that question, the how it happened. Because you may not know this, but when Jesus was walking around teaching, when the disciples were following him, they weren't starting a new religion. They were just like saying, this is what God wants from us. They thought they were living out the reality of the Old Testament, and they were just doing so in the correct way. Jesus was showing them the way. They were just a sect. They were just a group of people who just took religion really seriously in a different way than everybody else. But it wasn't some different religion. We think of it as a different religion, but it's really a movement. It wasn't something different. And it's just 120 people. How did that happen? How did it go from 120 people? We have more than 120 people in this room right here. And there's churches gathered all over the globe. How did that happen? I think origin stories are pretty cool. I think it's interesting to hear about a company, some tech company that started in somebody's garage, and now these guys are worth trillions of dollars. How did that happen? This is a little random, but I enjoy eating Dots pretzels. They're really good. You remember the first time you ate those? You're like, what in the world are these? These are delicious. What concoction did they put on there? Are there drugs in these things? Because you'll get a bag and you're just like, what? They're all gone. And then other members of your family will try to steal some of them. And you're like, please do not do that. These are all for me. What is that? What happened? Well, some lady in her kitchen in North Dakota started making pretzels. And the friends were like, these are really good. And then she started distributing them to friends. And then pretty soon people were like, you can sell these. And she turned it into a little company. She ended up selling Dots pretzels to Hershey's for $1.2 billion. You know that thing that you make in your kitchen that you share with your family could be worth $1.2 billion. She sold it to Hershey. She still lives in North Dakota. Why? I don't know. I would be out of there. I read a book about how Phil Knight created Nike. He was selling shoes out of the back of his car, and then he turned it. I bet you every single one of you in this room has something branded Nike, a sweatshirt, a pair of shoes. I'm wearing Nike shoes. I didn't even plan that. A pair of shoes that you have, a hat that you have. He turned this little thing that he was doing in the back of his car to this huge empire. He got Michael Jordan to sponsor, or he sponsored Michael Jordan. It's pretty amazing. They've made the origin story of Spider-Man like 16 times in the last 10 years. Since I've been an adult, There's like 5 different movies you can watch about how this high schooler got bit by a radioactive spider. They've made billions of dollars on these origin stories. What you are reading in the book of Acts is an origin story. All that success, Dots, Pretzels, Nike, Peter Parker, Marvel, all that, it pales in comparison to Christianity. There's 120 Christians in a room praying, thinking, what do we do next? And in 150 years, they would be everywhere, everywhere. I came across a quote this week that I thought was fascinating. It was by a church father named Tertullian, and he wrote a series of books called The Apologies. And he wasn't saying sorry. He was trying to explain Christianity to people that didn't understand it, trying to defend Christianity. It was like an apologetic. And one of the things he writes is that Christians in his day and age were treated terribly. They were blamed for everything. If there was an earthquake, it's those Christians. Economic disaster, it's those Christians. They blamed for everything. So Tertullian is a Christian, and he's writing a series of books saying, hey, you guys that are blaming us for everything, you're not even being logical. This is dumb. Let me explain to you what Christianity is really all about. He makes an argument in 3 parts. I think it's so fascinating. I'm going to read you a quote here in a second. But the argument he makes, the first argument, he's like, first of all, our entire thing is to love our enemies. That's our whole thing. We cannot cause you ill because that goes against everything that we have been taught to believe and do. All right, it's our whole thing. So stop blaming us for everything. We're on your side. We're trying to help you. Secondly, he says we actually make society better. He says this place would be a mess if it weren't for us Christians coming in. We're taking care of orphans. We're taking care of the sick. We're just doing all the things that you don't want to do that everybody thinks is too awful and they're above it all. We're doing all that. If you keep blaming us for everything, what happens if we just go away? Everything would fall apart. We're fixing society. But the third thing he says that I think is so interesting, he says, let's just do a little thought experiment. Let's say we wanted to cause you harm. Let's say we did want to destroy you. He says, if we did, we would crush you. We would dominate you. If we had a battle, we would win hands down. This is what he writes. This is so good. He says, for if we wished to play the part also of declared enemies, and not merely that of secret avengers, should we lack the force of numbers and of troops? Then he writes, the Moors and the Macromani and the Parthians, these are the North Africans, Germanic tribes, Persians, any race, any of whatsoever size, they're limited to a specific place and to their own territory. He goes, we are of but yesterday. We're brand new on the scene. We just started this movement and we are everywhere. We have filled all that is yours. We have filled cities and islands and fortified towns and country towns and centers of meetings and camps and tribes and classes of public attendance, the palace, the senate, the forum. We have only left you your temples. We are everywhere. And if we wanted to start a revolution, you would be in serious trouble. In 150 years, he wrote this probably 197 AD. And he says, Christians are everywhere now. Now, by 350 AD, Christians would be in the majority in the Roman Empire. I mean, this thing spread like wildfire. It's pretty amazing. There's no internet. There's no YouTube. There's no printing press. Even to those of you that are like, I have no idea what's going on in the world. You have no access to internet. I bet you every single one of you has heard a middle schooler say 6'7". Yes, you've heard it. How did that get everywhere? Well, it's internet and the kids are all doing the motion and all that. You've heard it. You've heard it all. How did this Christian message go from an obscure little corner of the world and then just get everywhere? There's no YouTube. There's no middle school classes that are spreading the word like, hey, every time somebody says 2 numbers in sequence, go nuts. There's nothing like that. None of that stuff is happening. How did that happen? And Acts answers that question. Luke says, I'll show you exactly how it happened. In fact, this is so fascinating to me. I was doing a little research. This is probably a little slightly off topic, but I think it's amazing. There is good evidence that Christianity made it all the way to eastern China by 86 AD. Likely, Paul the Apostle was still alive. John, the apostle, was still alive and writing, and the Christian message had made it thousands of miles away. It's staggering. We should see the power of God in these stories that we're reading, what God is doing, the movement that he is creating in the world. And if God can do it then God can do it now. If God can do it in their lives, under those circumstances, he can do it in your life, under your circumstances. If God can transform them, he can transform you. No matter how deep and dark and distant you feel, God can come for you and he can change things. It's the power of this story that we're reading. It's incredible what God did. It answers our questions. Secondly, it addresses our circumstances. There's a common movie trope. There's an apprentice who has raw talent but lacks discipline, and he needs a mentor to teach them how to do, to harness whatever it is. So Luke Skywalker, he has the Force, but he doesn't know how to harness it. So he's got to go talk to Yoda. Yes, very, very good, very good. Daniel, he's got some raw skills and some raw ability, but he keeps getting beat up by the Cobra Kai. So he's got to go find Mr. Miyagi, and he's got to learn, how do I channel this into something that makes sense, that can accomplish something good? And so they meet with them every day, and at first the apprentice is completely confused. Why am I lifting the X-Wing fighter out of the bog? Why am I painting your fence? Why am I doing this? But there's always a point in the movie where the apprentice has to face an obstacle or a challenge without the mentor. And they realize, oh, I wasn't just waxing on and off. I was learning karate moves, right? There's always a scene like that. Something similar, maybe they stole it from Acts, but something similar is happening in this story. And I think the passage I'm going to share with you in Acts 1 is supposed to be funny. I think it's ironic sometimes, because I think that there's this humor in these stories that we struggle to see, because we approach the scriptures so seriously and somberly that we sometimes miss the humor that these authors are conveying. In Acts chapter 1 and verse 6, just a few verses in, it says, then they gathered around Jesus. Jesus hasn't left yet. Then they gathered around Jesus and they're like, Lord, are you at this time going to finally restore the kingdom to Israel? And what they're asking is, remember the glory days back with King David and King Solomon, when we were the envy of the world? We want that again. You promised a kingdom. That's the kingdom we want. And they've been with him for 3 years, and Jesus keeps telling them, that's not the kind of kingdom we're building here. We're not building a kingdom with borders. We're not building a kingdom with weapons. We're not doing that. And he keeps saying that, and they keep not getting it. And here, at the end of Jesus' interactions with him, these guys are like, okay, so now is it time? Are we going to blow up all our enemies? And Jesus, I imagine, deep sigh, like, oh my goodness, I'm about to leave, and these guys still don't get it? And he says to them, it is not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority. So, by the way, all those fun things that you have read about some internet personality who's like, I know when the end of the world is going to take place, they're full of garbage. Every single one of them full of garbage, always has been. Because Jesus says even the apostles were not to know the times and dates. And so when people who read the book of Revelation, who was written by an apostle, that apostle did not know the times and dates. And so when people try to interpret Revelation saying, I have cracked the code, they're full of baloney. Jesus said that right here in the book of Acts. It's not for you to know the time of dates. Verse 8, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all of Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth, even in a corner of Minnesota called Woodbury. You will be my witnesses. After he said this, he was taken up before their very eyes, and a cloud hid them from their sight. The very last question they ask Jesus before Jesus is gone proves that they don't get it. It would be like the first time you left your kid at home I don't know when that age is supposed to be. It was probably a little young for our kids. But let's say it's 12, 13, I don't know. You're going out for the evening. You'll just be gone a few hours. They've got access to a phone. You've said, hey, if there's any problems, make sure you run to the neighbor's house. We've told them what's going on. Here's 911, all that. You've done all that. If, as you were walking out the door, one of your kids or the kid you were leaving at home says, okay, hey, do I get out the power drill now or after you guys leave? You'd be like, the fact that you ask that question proves that you are not ready to be left alone. The fact that they ask this question proves that they're just not getting it yet. Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus says, hey, I don't want to tell you when things are going to happen. Instead, you go change the whole world. Bye. That's what he does. I'm out. What in the world? Do you ever feel like that? Do you ever feel like, I would love to have specifics from the mouth of God about what I should do with my life right here and now? I would love to know what I should do with this career choice. I would love to know exactly how to interact with this adult child. I would love to know what to do with this relative that is driving me bonkers. I would love to have step-by-step actions. I would love that. And Jesus is like, yeah, peace out. I'll see you when I see you. Why? What is good? That's our circumstance. We are in the same boat as they are. Acts is the story of people working out how to follow Jesus without Jesus being there to hold their hand. That's what the story is. The Spirit comes in chapter 2, which, by the way, you should read multiple times. The Spirit comes in chapter 2, but that's our story. They have to work out what it looks like to live the Christian life in an environment that Jesus isn't telling them, okay, take this step, turn left, turn right, go here, go there. That's our story. And there's lots of insight in the book of Acts about how they go about doing that. But I think it's important that we should see our circumstances in these stories. And if the Spirit could lead them, the Spirit can lead you. If the Spirit could give them insight and guidance for how they should interact with their families and their jobs and their careers and their schedules and their calendars, the Spirit can do that for you. If the Spirit can take what they were doing and turn it into something incredible, even though it didn't feel like it was on their own power, the Spirit can do that for us. We are in that same situation where Jesus is not here for us to go, hey, Jesus, I really need turn-by-turn directions here. Jesus is like, I'm giving you the Spirit, work it out, I'll be back. That's our situation. And I know a lot of people, maybe at the beginning of the year, you feel like you've got a little bit, you haven't messed up anything this year so far, so you feel like you've got things under control. But we're going to get deeper into the year, and there's just going to be life circumstances that we find difficult and confusing, and we just don't know how to address them or even how to think about them. And Acts gives us not a blueprint, but a framework for how do I interact with God? How do I interact with the Spirit? All right. Malachi's ready to go to the next one. So, number 3. Acts guides our transitions. Acts guides our transitions. The people that we're reading about in these stories were constantly facing new circumstances. Talk about decision fatigue. So things go pretty well. Peter preaches the first sermon in Acts chapter 2, and they go from 120 people to 3,000 people. That's pretty good. Not bad at all. I would be very, very happy if that were to happen. And then a few verses later, or a few chapters later, they grow to 5,000 people. This just ball keeps rolling. And I was thinking a little bit this week, like, what if that happened to us? What if, hey, I don't know what we've got in the room, a couple hundred people in the room. What if next week we had 5,000 people show up? First of all, a lot of you would be really annoyed. I would be so ecstatic, but some of you would be like, my parking spot is gone? My seat is gone? I had to sit on the floor, Patrick? I'm very frustrated about the current circumstances. But then I even thought about all the logistics. How would we even address that? If we all of a sudden had no idea, because we generally know, this is going to be this many people, and we see, it's going to be a little cold, fewer people are coming, or it's going to be nice out, fewer people are coming, or it's going to be busy weekend, fewer people are coming. We generally know what general size crowd we're going to have, and so we can accommodate that size crowd. So when we prepare communion, we have to have enough communion for everybody. If 5,000 people showed up, we would be like, hey, somebody's got to go to Jerry's real quick, buy all their grape juice Figure out something for bread. I don't know. We're going to have to do something because we don't have enough for everybody. And donuts? I mean, is it church if there are not donuts? What would we do? Where would we get 5,000 donuts? I'm glad you guys are thinking about it. That's good. In this story that we're reading, things are going great for them. There's a lot of growth. There's a lot of momentum. In fact, it says at least one time that they enjoyed the favor of everybody. Like people were like, oh, these people are really good. They're really dedicated. But then the sentiment starts to shift. And by the time you get to chapter 8, verse 1, it says, on that day, this is a day things shift. On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and everyone except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. And now imagine if that happened. All of a sudden, it's just me and the elders showing up to church because everybody had to move out of state. I mean, you think about the logistic challenges, the transitions that they were going through. Acts is all about navigating change. In fact, at the very beginning of the story of Acts, everybody is Jewish. Everybody eats kosher. Everybody attempts to follow Hebrew law. But you get deeper into Acts, and Gentiles start showing up, and they've got to navigate that. What do we do now? We were having fellowship meals, and nobody brought pork, but Sister so-and-so brought a pork dish. What do we do? How do we handle that? And it's all about transitions. It's all about transitions. I think about this sometimes. I think about the challenges that we face in 2025 or 2026 that are different than what they were facing. Here's some questions I wrestle with. How do you disciple people in an age of extreme political division? People are highly sensitive to the political implications of the language I use from stage. If I say a word that in their mind harbors political meaning, they can get frustrated, or they want to hear their view signaled in the words that I use. That's hard to navigate, and those tensions are shifting. Because every time there's a news story, everybody's got to say, okay, what narrative do I believe based on my political ideology about this story? How do we follow Christ? How do we as leaders encourage people to follow Christ in the midst of that? It is challenging. What does devotion to Jesus look like when people are insanely going to give themselves a mental breakdown over the top busy? What does it look like to slow down and devote oneself to Christ when we have to compete against these insane schedules that everyone has? What does that look like? How do you love people well in an environment that has a shifting definition of what it means to be loving, what it means to be respectful, what it means to be kind? How do you love people well when those definitions keep shifting and you're trying, but you do something and it's taken incorrectly, or it's not taken with the intent that you meant it? How do we advocate for life-altering truth in an era where there are not always agreed upon definitions of objective truth? How do we do that? And in fact, it can be considered unkind to imply that someone might hold an idea that is not true. How do we do that? It's a challenge. We live in an era of transitions that we are navigating. You're navigating them too. The things that you struggled with as a teenager, they're very similar to what your children are struggling with, but sometimes they're like different. Like, I didn't anticipate that. I don't know. I didn't have a rule for that. What do I do with that? These are hard questions. I'm about to make you real nervous. Woodbury, our church, we're in a period, a season of transition. I know you don't like that. People don't like when we change the times. People don't like when we change the lighting. People don't like when we change the background on the song lyrics on the screen. People don't like change. And we are in a season of change. Well, we've had long time, you know, this isn't news to you. We just like to bury our heads in the sand a little bit, but we've had longtime leaders of this church move away. God drew them somewhere else. Well, what does that mean for us? What is God doing in us and through us? We're training future leaders, but that's going to create a different personality for our church, and that's okay. By the way, some of you have experienced this. If you moved away from Woodbury for about 12 months and came back, you wouldn't recognize about a third of the people in the room. You'd be like, I have no idea. Every once in a while, it's a little off topic, but I'll share it. Every once in a while, I'll talk with someone who maybe used to attend Woodbury years and years and years ago. And sometimes they'll lodge a complaint. Well, I didn't like this. I didn't like that. And sometimes the complaint that they'll lodge pertains to things that happened 25 years ago that I don't even know the people they're complaining about. I don't even know. Things change. Things change. Seasons change. And Woodbury's in a period of transition. And change makes some people want to dig in. But I'll tell you what. Transitions are an opportunity for God to show up and work in us. And that's what we're in. Transitions are an opportunity to invite God into our situation. We can hunker down and say, I'm just going to ride this one out. Or we can invite God into the transition that he's doing in us. This isn't announcing anything, and I rarely talk about like my dreams for the future of Woodbury, and I probably should do it more. And hopefully this is like spirit-inspired imagination, but I thought I would just share with you some of what I think about the future. We have this massive geographic footprint. People drive pretty far to come to this building. And it's not necessarily because they're like, oh, it's so awesome, the building's so beautiful, Patrick, you're preaching so amazing. It's not that at all. It's like they like the community, or they like the Church of Christ brand, they like something about what we do, or they have family relationships. But we have this massive geographic area. And if you were to just sit down, and I think we did this in a sermon a while back, I think it would take you like 6+ hours to drive the perimeter of where people live and come to Woodbury. You know, Red Wing and Mankato. It's pretty wild. And we have small groups in a lot of those places, but here's the thing I kind of dream about. What would it look like to have spiritual communities in the places the people who drive here actually live? What would it look like to have churches that we were able to rise up people and help function, and they wouldn't have to drive 45 minutes, an hour to get to church here, but they were able to invite their friends and coworkers and neighbors and family to church with them? Would that be amazing? I love that some of you drive as far as you do. It makes me feel so good when I see your car pulling in the parking lot. I'm like, oh, they made it. Look at them go. I mean, there's some people I could call out in this room that it's just incredible. So this is not like a thing to say, I want you out of here. It's just a thing to say, wouldn't you love it if there was a church in your community that you could draw people to? Is it possible that God maybe would do something like that through us? I'm probably even making the elders nervous here because I didn't even run this by them. I'm just telling you my dream. I think it's an amazing dream to think about. Wouldn't that be cool? Judging by some of your reactions, you don't think it would be cool. And you're like, but who would leave? And it would be different and things wouldn't be the same. Exactly. Period of transition. It'd be just, I think about that kind of stuff. I pray about that kind of stuff all the time. I have no idea what God might do. I have no idea what God might lead in that way, but it's intriguing. I think one of the biggest dangers churches face isn't necessarily the culture without and the influence the culture might have. And I actually think one of the biggest dangers people face in the church is this unwillingness to change and to adapt. We have this sense that the power is in staying the same. But the power has always been in God, who leads through seasons of transition. If you read the book of Acts, you cannot get more than one chapter before there's some major change that they have to address and deal with. We should see God in their changes. And if we can see God in their changes, maybe we can realize that God will guide us in ours. Now, maybe it's not church-wide change. If that freaked you out, just whatever. Maybe it's just personal life change. Maybe God is growing you in some ways that you don't like. Maybe God is challenging you and convicting you to get rid of some habits or patterns that you really love, that are part of your routine. And God's saying, no, these need to be part of 2025, not 2026. Maybe God is calling you to something new and different. And it is easy just hunker down and buckle in and just hope nothing changes. But maybe God is calling you to something new and different. And the question we should ask is if we can see God in the change there, we should be able to see God leading through change here. Are we dug in or are we ready? I'm going to wrap up with this. When Corrine and I were dating, my wife and I were dating, right over here, I worked at a balloon and flower shop, and about 3 blocks away, she worked at a camera place. They sold cameras, developed pictures, stuff like that. One day, I got off work before she did, and she drove Astrovan. Astrovan, was it? Yeah, that her parents had got her. It was a very, very cool car. I mean, if you want to be cool when you're a teenager, drive one of those. I don't even know if they make them anymore. But I could tell that she was at work because her Astrovan was parked behind the shop, and I thought, oh, you know, it'd be funny. It'd be funny if I got in there and hid in the back seat. Frontal lobes, you know, all that. But I thought this would be a great idea. So she left it unlocked. Really, that's on her. And I got in, and I got in the very back row of the Astrovan, and I laid down like a serial killer would do. I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I laid down in the back, and then I waited for her. I knew she was getting off pretty soon, and I waited for her to get off. And then I thought, I'm just going to jump out at the right time, and I'm going to scare her. This will be great. Genius idea, Patrick. Why didn't you think this is how you court a woman? Try to terrify her to death. And I don't know what was going on in my brain, but I didn't jump up immediately. She got in the car and, started it up, started to pull out of the parking lot. And first of all, I shouldn't have done it. But if I was going to do it, I should have done it right away before she started putting the car in gear. And so then I'm down there thinking, oh no. Like now I understand this was a bad idea. And so what I decide to do is not like, I'm like, okay, how can I make this as least scary as possible? How can I make this experience? And so what I thought is rather than like a jump scare, like boo, I would just kind of sit up. Isn't it funny how that's like way more scary? So I would just kind of sit up and I would just be back there and maybe she would see me. I know, it's way more terrifying than like a jump scare. So I do that. I just kind of sit up and I'm just sitting there and she still doesn't notice me right away. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to have to clear my throat. I'm going to have to do something to indicate my presence. And I don't know, she could probably tell you exactly what I did. I think what it was is after several blocks, she glanced in the rearview mirror and there was a human in the back seat. Me, her boyfriend, the guy that wanted to marry her. And she, to her credit, this is kind of her personality, she didn't scream. That's not who she is. If you hear her scream, something has really gone wrong. She didn't jump. It was just like, I know adrenaline surged through her body, but she just calmly sat there and she looked in the rearview mirror and she said to me, I thought you might be in here. Do you remember this? And I was like, how in the world did you know I would be in the car? I kid you not. She says, I smelled you. On that note, would you like to marry me? And that's, I think I don't know what I smelled like. I don't suppose that was good. Hopefully it was pheromones putting off something good there. I don't know. But she had sensed my presence because of my smell. Here's what I want for us out of the book of Acts. You're like, wait, how does that relate to Acts? Let me tell you. Here's what I want for us out of the book of Acts. I want us to sense God in these stories. I want us to see the hand of God. We call it the Acts of the Apostles, but really it's the Acts of the Spirit working through the apostles. I want us to sense God in these stories, to see his fingerprints, to see his presence and his power, to understand that the Spirit is a constant, Jesus is a constant, God is a constant in these stories. And the Spirit leads and guides and sometimes in counterintuitive, confusing ways. And the narrative will shift. It doesn't just follow one person. It follows Peter, it follows Paul, it follows Philip. The narrative will shift, but the presence of God is the constant. I want us to see God in these stories so that we can get better at seeing God in our story. This is so important. Being able to see the fingerprints of God in our lives. And this is the thing that kills people's spirituality. Because they're like, I'm looking for God and I don't see him. He seems distant. He seems absent. I don't see him. And I think part of the problem is not that he's not there, but that we're not good at looking for him. I want us to see God in our stories, to see that our lives are bound up in God, so much so that we can't even recognize him. He blesses us so much that we take it for granted and don't give him any credit. He blesses the just and the unjust. He blesses the atheist and the believer to such a degree that we have no idea. It's like when you get sick and you're like, man, I miss being healthy. That was so good. We don't recognize it until we don't have it. You have it. And I know you can look at things in your lives and say, well, that's not good, that's not good, that's not good, that's not good. I want this to be different, I want that to be different. But if you took stock of the things that were good in your life, you would have an endless list. Because you have been blessed by God. God is in your life. I want us to be able to see him. He's in your family dynamics, even the difficult ones. He's in your career path. He's in your relaxation, your vacations. He's in your joys and sorrows, your successes, your failures. He's in our church. He's in our transitions. He's in our story. I think one of the most transformative experiences that you can have in 2026 is to realize that God is in your story.